1, 2, and welcome back to the Workbook of Fun and problem 7 today. A very exciting problem about categories of fixed expenses. It doesn't get much better than that on spring break. The only thing that could happen better is if you were sitting in a pile of sand. And that's what I'm doing right now in my kitchen. Nonetheless, this problem today is brought to you by the tennis and baseball teams at Tulane University, specifically Ethan, Addie, and Grant. So they're going to take us through this problem of categorizing our fixed expenses, and hopefully that will give you some insight into the challenges that you might face on the exam. Remember, what we're doing here is to say, okay, these students don't have any idea, they didn't have any idea what was coming, and as a result, they just have to pretend like this is getting ready to study for finals again. So we're trying to kind of simulate the idea of all the class getting this information, starting to think about studying for finals and how you might go about it. And I'll try and give you some specific ideas of things you need to focus on when you're working through these problems. Okay, so that's the current strategy that I have. And so wanted to make sure everybody knew where I was in terms of the Workbook of Fun. Okay, so in the Workbook of Fun, you can find that out on Canvas. Okay, you've got all 20 things that are going to be on the final exam. So that is your play sheet, your call sheet. This is what's happening for each of the items. And today we're doing problem 7. You already have videos out there for 1 through 6. By the end of the day, we'll be out here through problem 10. And then when we get back to class on Wednesday, we'll review this, but I'll also be doing some additional videos for each of these. You guys have any questions about that? Ethan, Addie?
No.
You guys good?
Good.
Good.
All right, that's cool. So as I said, we're going to go in and work on this particular problem. And so Addie, I'm going to let you go first. Try to remain calm. I know the excitement is huge when you get to work on one of these in front of everybody. So the things to remember is we made a big deal almost when we first started meeting online. We started making a big deal about the different kinds of costs, fixed costs. And so in that case, we had traceable and controllable. We had traceable, not controllable, and then we had something called common. Okay? And so those things are the key to this. And so remember the principle we talked about. It's the controllability. If the managers can control it, then it becomes a controllable expense. If not, then it's a non-controllable. And if it's not specifically identifiable with a division, then it's just a general expense, and we think about that as common. Okay? Addie, do you kind of remember that setup that we had?
Yes, somewhat.
All right. Yeah, and this is exactly where I want you to be. Okay? You've not prepped for this. You're just kind of saying, okay, what do I remember? And so as you think about studying for finals, that's the whole goal. You can't say, oh, what do I remember? And then what do I need to fill in around it? So that's kind of where we are. The other thing this problem is a missing data problem. You might recall, I kind of like missing data problems. Do you recall that, Addie?
I do.
Yeah, and so many people remember that in a very painful way, but nonetheless, we're going to try this and see where we go. And so I've tried to put in kind of visible gray the answers, but it's mostly just to remind me how to get to the answers. So nonetheless, we're trying to fill in these blanks, and there's a couple of things that are happening. I've already given you the totals for each of these categories, okay? Everybody's got the totals for each of the categories. So that's already done. And then you've got some information that's the total, and you've got some that's just kind of spread out. So the first one we want to look at, Addie, is going to be the one that kind of sets a foundation for this whole thing. How would we go about getting that total?
You could add up all the ones in that row.
Yeah, so if I take all of these, add them together, I'm going to get 62,800. Okay, and the reason we started there is because that's a consistent idea in this whole chart. Okay, I can always add across each of the columns to get the total. Okay, so that's one thing you can count on. All right, any questions about that? And so once she knows that, then she can also go up to this next one, the maintenance contract, and you could tell me this one, right? How am I going to get there?
By adding up the numbers that are in the row.
Yeah, so in this case, I've got the 10 and the 26, so that's the 36. Now, one of the things you'll notice here is that we are missing something in each of those columns. And why do you think that would be?
Because the maintenance contract is a controllable.
Yep, so what she did was say, okay, these must be controllable by the divisions. And so let's take a moment and look at these categories. So maintenance. We're probably only going to have maintenance in the areas where we're making our products. And so it makes some sense that the managers in these two different divisions will control how much they're charged for their maintenance contracts. And because they can specifically control it, there's probably nothing in the not controllable, and there's nothing in the common. When it came to occupancy, however, all of these places, all of these divisions and spaces are going to have some sort of occupancy charge, but the key phrase here is those are allocated. And so anytime you see the word allocated, okay, you need to be aware of that. And that's going to become an even bigger deal later. But right now, some of those can be designated as controllable, some of them not controllable. Okay, any questions about that? You good?
Yeah.
Okay, so what I like to do at that point is I'll start filling in our problem so that we can see the answers and you don't have to worry about trying to read my writing. So that's kind of the benefit of that. Okay. Now, Ethan, I'm coming to you. All right.
Okay.
Okay. And so one of the things we need to think about here is what's our next step. And so what I put in next was, and you have to be aware of these things. I gave you a total. And I've not given you a total before. And the question is, this is about a plant manager's salary. Now, the plant manager's salary is probably not controllable in an individual division, okay? Now, the thing I want to be specific about is I'll have to tell you controllable and not controllable. I don't expect you to be able to know just by reading the description what it is. If I just tell you occupancy, you don't know for sure. And so I'll have to give you some insight into that and explain it a little more. But the idea here is this is not controllable. Now, the other piece of information you have is that it's allocated in a ratio of 20% and 80%. So given that information, how do you think you would go about filling in these two pieces?
You'd take 20% of 75,000, 80%.
Yeah. So this is 20%, and this is 80% of that 75,000. And you wind up with 15 and 60. Okay? So once again, note that I've got to tell you some basis for that. I can't just expect you to know it. Okay, so that's kind of the big issue here. I have to be fairly straightforward in the type of cost it is. What I'm testing is whether or not you can categorize it into these different categories based upon the descriptions. Okay, so that's kind of the next piece we're thinking about. So as I come down through here, let's go ahead and put our answers. Go ahead and put our answers in here. And so at that point, okay, we have the ability then to go in and say and do these two, right? Because depreciation is not controllable. You will see this only as a not controllable expense. So this one is a not. But that doesn't mean that, I still will tell you that on the exam. So the challenge here, Ethan, is how am I going to go about getting the 10 and the 46?
Well, so to get the 10, you'd add up the 15,000 and 3,800 and subtract that from the 2,800 total.
Yep. So these are added together to get 18,800. I subtract it from the 28 and I wind up with 10,000. And the same thing over here, I wind up with 46. Any questions about that? So what we've done up to this point is we've gone horizontally. Now we're going vertically. So you have to be able to work these little puzzles to figure out the missing data. Okay? Any questions about that? Addie, you good?
I am good.
Grant, how about you, man?
I'm good.
All right. And everybody's having a good time, right?
Having a
course.
blast.
Okay, well, there you go. I think you want any distraction you can get. So that will work out. All right. So the next thing's Grant, I've got for you. Okay, you're the big finish, and so we can figure out, just like Ethan did. You can figure out these two, right? You don't have to calculate them, but tell me how you're going to get there.
So you take the totals from the maintenance contract and occupancy, subtract that from the 48,000 and 196,000.
Okay, and you wind up with 30. And do the same thing here, and you wind up with 130. Okay, and so I got that. Then the only thing left is going to be down here. And we haven't really talked about this kind of expense, but we're about to. And so I've got 40,000 in common. And so Grant, you can go ahead and fill that in, right, as 35,000.
Sure.
And so the challenge here is to make sure you understand what a common expense is. And the common expense are fixed expenses I'm incurring that I can't specifically identify with a division. So like the CEO, or HR, IT, all those things are benefiting all the divisions, but they're not specifically, I can't identify them specifically with the division. And so those are the ones that are called common. Now the thing I also want you to remember is this. Can you guys now see the northwest part? Okay.
Yeah.
And so when we did these segments, or divisions, we said there are three kinds of fixed expenses you have to be able to deal with. And so we've calculated out controllable, the not controllable, and the common. This is the problem we worked before we went on break, okay? And so the problem we just worked says, okay, how would I actually get to the numbers that eventually get into my segment or divisional income statements. And so that's the link that you've got. And so what's happening in this one, we set up the fixed expenses. We're going to take these totals and we're going to work them into the next problem, which is problem 8. But for now, I'm going to let these folks off the hook. And I want to thank them all for taking time out of their day to help me, but also help everybody in class, because we got to find out a way to make sure we can get through all the topics in a review process so everybody has a chance to take a look at them. Any questions? Ethan, you got any questions?
Don't, thank you.
Okay. Grant, anything? Or Addie?
I do not.
All right. All right. Well, as long as you guys are good, then I'm going to say we're finished. And for now, everyone, please go away. So
Thank you.
I'm gonna close this thing out, and